Modern-day South Africa is a long walk from what it used to be decades back. Before now, South Africa was run by an all-white government responsible for the oppression of the freedom and rights of blacks in South Africa, creating a deeply divided society resulting in racial tension in the country. These circumstances created crises that would impact the life of Nelson Mandela, who grew up amidst these turbulent times. All of the events would inspire Nelson Mandela to take action and work towards creating a new country for his people. With a charismatic flair for freedom and justice, Nelson Mandela fought for his people's voices to be heard. From joining the African National Congress during his school days to being a frontrunner of the group's cause in the long run, Mandela would turn out to be a public enemy of the apartheid government. He would be tortured, banned from speaking in public, and often get arrested on several occasions. All of his actions would finally lead to his 30 years imprisonment. Welcome to another amazing episode where we talk about icons that have tremendously shaped our world. In today's episode, we take a walk back in time to revisit an era depicted by strife, social classifications, and discrimination. We will be exploring the struggles and challenges of Dr. Nelson Mandela. We explore not just the achievements of Nelson Mandela, but also events that transpired before his release from prison and rise to power. Before we continue, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more exciting stories like this one. Without further delay, let's explore 6 major challenges that Nelson Mandela faced in the course of his struggles. Number 1. Racism and social discrimination. After a failed attempt at getting a degree in the University of Fort Hare, an institution for black students in South Africa, Mandela fled to Johannesburg in quest of greener pastures and came in contact with South African capitalism, communism, and the activism of the African National Congress, ANC, a political party which was concerned with the acknowledgement and proper implementation of civil rights for black South Africans. As he had no choice but to toggle between petty jobs and trying to survive in Alexandria, an impoverished township, Mandela managed to pursue a higher education at the University of South Africa and passed his BA exams in 1943, where he returned after that to Johannesburg to chase a political path in law. At the University of the Witwatersrand, where Mandela proceeded to study law, he found out that he was the only black African student there. There, he suffered from racial and social discrimination, hence a key factor for his increasingly radical political stance and joining the ANC in 1943, where he participated actively in all of the party's political activities. Number 2. Resistance by the apartheid government. In 1948, the National Party, which had just been formed through alliances of the Afrikaner Party and the Verenigde Nasionale Party, propagated racial discrimination with the new apartheid legislation they signed into law. That led to a call for direct action by Mandela and some other members of the ANC against the bill. Still, Alfred Zuma, the ANC president at the time, didn't approve of the measures that were to be taken by some of the members of the group, resulting to violence. Consequently, Zuma was impeached and was replaced by a more radical group of committees who took a militant-like approach to carrying out their responsibilities. These political actions over the years eclipsed Mandela's pursuit of a degree that he failed his final year at Wit thrice. He eventually withdrew from the school in 1949. Number 3. Oppression from the government. Mandela was arrested several times even before his long-term imprisonment for different reasons, which seemed not to be substantial enough. On June 22nd, he was arrested, among many others, and found guilty of what was known as statutory communism. Still, their 9-month hard labor sentence was put on hold for a while. In December of that year, he was prohibited from attending meetings or talking to more than one individual at a time for 6 months. That distorted his participation and leadership role in the party. In August 1953, Mandela and his friend Tambo opened their law firm, making it the first and only law firm Africans ran. That was a huge responsibility, as they tended to mostly blacks who came to them to help with issues of police brutality and other forms of oppressive acts incited upon them. The government authorities were unhappy with this development, removing their office permit under the Group Arias Act. Subsequently, they had to move to an equally inaccessible remote location. That resulted in a dwindling in their relationships with their clients. By March 1956, Mandela had already been banned thrice from appearing publicly and making public speeches, but he often defied it. In December 1957, Mandela was arrested again among national executives at the ANC, accusing him of treason against the state. The case lingered on until it was adjourned in September 1957. In January 1958, it was picked up again, and the defendants were made to go on trial in the Transvaal Supreme Court. 6 years later, they were proven not guilty since they were not affiliated with violent activities, or, in fact, communism. In March 1959, Mandela was arrested with 5 other activists and imprisoned for 5 months, even without charging them. That was problematic for Mandela and his colleagues, as they could not reach their lawyers and vice versa, so the lawyers resorted to protest until the activists were released after lifting the state of emergency in August 1960. The police once again captured Mandela on August 5, 1962. He was subsequently sentenced to 5 years imprisonment, having charged him with inciting workers' strikes and leaving the country without permission. But all that took a far worse downhill when the police went on to discover some paperwork of MK, of which some mentioned Mandela. MK was a faction under the ANC responsible for protecting the party's cause by using weapons and sabotaging plants and target locations if necessary. The faction had been created as a response to the plights of the common person, since the government was not reacting to the peaceful approach of the ANC in the first place. Number 4. Imprisonment. Mandela and his colleagues were sentenced to life imprisonment after they had admitted to the charge of sabotage. They were transferred to the Robben Island prison and remained there for the next 18 years. Serving his term there, he was alienated from the rest of the non-political prisoners and was put in a prison cell that was only 8ft by 7ft big. He survived hard labor, physical and verbal harassment from warders, periods of solitary confinement, and years of restricted interaction, a halt at some point to the degree he was trying to obtain in prison, and a rise of new political radicals in the country, whom he met some who were likewise thrown later on the island. Mandela was later transferred to Pollsmoor Prison in April 1982 on the suspicion that he, alongside his comrades, was gaining an influence on the much younger prisoners. During his jail term service at Pollsmoor, a potential civil war was lingering in the country due to the continued systemic segregation of blacks in political and social matters. At that time, Mandela was summoned and told he'd be released only if he rejected violence as a political weapon, but he declined. That was in February 1985. Number 5. Initial lack of foreign support. It has been proven over the years that the Western government has always been cynical about Mandela's activism. On several occasions, he's been linked to having relations with communism, which Mandela denied later on. It was, in fact, because of this suspicion, the CIA once exposed his hiding location to the South African government. It had also been discovered recently that Mandela was on the terrorist watch list of the United States. Additionally, the sanctions placed upon South Africa for its apartheid system made it difficult for the anti-apartheid movement to seek support outside the country. Number 6. Internal division. The ANC has always had its share of problems along the course of fighting for justice, most especially with its mode of leadership and decision-making. There was always disagreement over tactics and strategies to be applied. One of those instances was using weapons to advocate for their cause. Some agreed, while others were in opposition to the idea. Rifts like this were always a setback for the movement, making it difficult for executives like Mandela and his colleagues to present a unified front. Now, before we delve into his struggles, Nelson Mandela faced significant struggles during his time as being the country's first black president. Things didn't turn out all rosy after Mandela won the April 1994 elections. As expected, there were a lot of damages to be corrected, and even before that, some media outlets were already getting cynical over his presidential election as they believed it wouldn't be in the interest of all. Mandela also had to deal with his health issues and relations with international bodies. His goal of reconciliation was quite challenging to attain, as some blacks along the line insisted he was trying to favor the whites to the detriment of people of his skin color. In 1996, a new policy, in response to the declining economy, was implemented to foster the country's economic growth through market economics and foreign investments, maintaining South Africa's mixed economy. Still, many ANC members criticized the policy, tagging it as a neoliberal policy that didn't address social inequality. There was also the issue of an exponential increase in crime rates throughout the country, which Mandela was criticized for not combating it. Over the years, Mandela pushed many of the duties to his deputy before resigning after his first tenure. At large, he was described by few analysts to be ineffective during his tenure as a president. His old age and deteriorating health might have contributed to the inefficiency. Evidently, he remained more famous as an activist and a fighter for human rights than as a president. When in power, Mandela would recognize the need for a peaceful and unified movement aimed at reconciliation. Mandela faced difficulties trying to balance the interests of every race in the country, from whites to blacks to mixed to Indians. At one point, he had issues with a few members of the ANC who believed he was not attending to the problem of social inequality. He had also been called out for failing to work towards the interest of his people. He also fell out with a deputy of his, de Klerk, when the latter accused Mandela of not involving him or his party in some decision-making, so he resigned from being a deputy president. Despite these challenges, Mandela has proven over time that all he wants is a country that's driven by one sole purpose, and that's liberty for all. Having highlighted these difficulties and challenges Mandela had to go through to transform South Africa into a multiracial democratic society, from her brutal apartheid era that safeguards and protects the rights of all citizens without trumping anyone, we can now delve into his struggles properly. That is, what he tends to achieve with his fight and persistence. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I've cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society where everyone lives in harmony and has equal opportunities. It is an ideal that I hope to live for and to achieve. But if need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. These historic words that Mandela uttered at the 1964 trial succinctly unveiled his struggles. Nelson Mandela's struggles involved the risk of fighting and risking everything until his goals were actualized. Nelson Mandela had 5 goals in mind in his fight for freedom. Outlined were the goals he had in mind. Number 1, struggle for peace and justice. The apartheid era reeked of social chaos and imbalance due to the subjugation of particular kinds of people to oppression. A fight for equality in the eyes of the law implies restoring peace and balance to the country. It also means eradicating the long run of injustice perpetrated on the powerless. Mandela was doing South Africa a lot of good by taking up the cause, as it somewhat helped to avert a full-blown war in the future. Number 2, struggle for freedom and liberation. All Mandela wanted was a nation free of restrictive and oppressive laws that governed and controlled every aspect of one's life based on color or race, dictating where one could live or even go to, work or eat, even as far as the kind of school one can attend, and healthcare or social services that can be administered to one. Mandela wanted freedom from being put into a cage or category of white, black, colored, or Indian. Ironically, he also fought for the whites to be free of their limitations. Number 3. Recognition of the civil and political rights of South African blacks. During the Apartheid, the blacks could neither participate in political activities such as voting, nor express how they wanted to or even carry out industrial actions in opposition to the government's wrongdoings. They were marginalized and confined to an inferior version of themselves. Nelson Mandela fought for their voices to be heard and their rights recognized. His struggle against apartheid paved the way for adequately implementing blacks' civil and political rights in South Africa. The mandate he stood on emphasizes that every black has the right to be seen as equal to every other race. Number 4. Social order and equality. Mandela's struggle aimed at uplifting blacks to their true identity and ensuring equality among everyone in the country. A diverse society that sees themselves as equal fosters harmony and tolerance. Equality, which brings about social order, was one of the things that Mandela strived to achieve in his long run to freedom. He envisioned a society that obeys law and order and adheres to the principle of social equality. He dreamt a lot about freedom and realized those dreams with his blood and sweat at the expense of his own freedom. When he eventually exited prison amidst the changing tides of time, Mandela met a different South African, of which he was a foundation builder. Number 5. Reconciliation. Reconciliation remained a mantra for Nelson Mandela after he was released from prison. Elected as the president in 1994, he made readjustments to the Constitution, enabling interracial relations in the country. Since it seemed like he was fighting for the freedom of blacks, he didn't want the liberty of a group at the expense of another, nor did he fight for the subjugation of another race. One of the achievements of Mandela as a president was the creation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which helped document the violation of human rights and assist both the victims and violators in coming to terms with the past. The commission was focused on healing from the past instead of retribution on the side of the perpetrators of the apartheid. Mandela fought for a country that would acknowledge the past, yet not dwell on it, but look onto the future with a great generation. In summary, the little boy from Thembu with dreams and aspirations that could have been cut short because of his limitations as a black man rose above every form of oppression and fought for those dreams, representing the hope of every other black person in the country. Mandela, who firmly believed in peace and justice for all, did not allow his voice to get subdued, nor did he bow to the difficulties, obstacles, and challenges he faced on his journey towards freedom. He accepted these challenges and played on till the very end. He continued to stay relentless even in the face of troubles. His struggle and his purpose had become a model for younger generations. He had become a permanent stamp in the note of history, which everyone admired and longed to follow in his footsteps in the cause of achieving justice. Despite the years he would miss out on in prison, Mandela still preached forgiveness and reconciliation for all. He believed everyone, regardless of his race, ought to cooperate for the good of South Africa. Despite the turbulent years, Mandela had proven to possess the virtues of a good leader, which is worthy of emulation. Although he lived a pretty difficult life, even after his release. From being president until his death due to several ailments, he lived a fulfilled life that would be spoken of from generation to generation. To stay up to date with more informative contents in this channel, remember to hit the subscribe button and click the notifications bell to get notified anytime we upload an exciting video like this one. Thank you.